Welcome to The Founder's Mind, a podcast powered by the Kadar Group. This is your host, Adam Muchler. Before we kick off the conversation with Peter, some exciting news. The Founder's Mind is entering 2020 with a sponsor. We're currently producing Season 2 to be sponsored by Upside Business Travel. We couldn't be more amped to work with the Upside and their team. We're looking forward to sharing more soon. And now on this episode, we have Peter Trevisani, owner and CEO of New Mexico United, New Mexico's first professional sports team. Listen in as Peter shares his personal and professional journey, the soul-searching that led him to found a pro sports team, and how he sees soccer, aka football, as a way to create community and unite people in a way that transcends their differences. Welcome to The Founder's Mind.
Great, thank you for having me.
I'll tell you, I'm based in DC. I'm at a WeWork in DC right now. My wife's family lives in Albuquerque, so I've been going to Albuquerque since 2009. And I've always made a joke to my in-laws about just talk to me when Albuquerque gets a pro sports team. And as you know, being the CEO and one of the owners of the club, New Mexico has a pro sports team now, and it's living in Albuquerque, which is pretty amazing. And I went to a game, and it was one of my favorite sporting experiences in recent history. And this is not hyperbole; I'm serious.
Fantastic, love hearing that.
And the next day I had to go get some swag because I wanted that Somos Unidos shirt, but you didn't have it at the stadium. So I went to the store on Central, and I saw you there, and I didn't end up saying hi, but I told my wife, Erica, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's the owner of the club. And she's like, how do you know? And I was like, I'm getting an owner vibe from him.
It's probably my wife.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. But I'd love to hear about, I mean, I know you've got a sort of a rich history with your career, and you've done a lot of things, but what caught my eye and what made me aware of you was this soccer team, New Mexico United. And I'm really curious about how you got there. And I read some articles, but I'd love to hear it in your words. How did you get to willing this club into existence? Yeah,
well, first of all, I just appreciate what you just said there. A lot of the things that you just said, sharing your experience, which is mostly qualitative, although you did buy a ticket and you did buy some merch. We could probably back into what all that was, but mostly what you said was qualitative. The fact that, you went to this game and, it was one of the best experiences you've been to, ever, period. I mean, that's really what we're going for. We get a lot of people talking about how many people are coming, this and that. And I'm always reminding myself, the team, that we're really going for it's the quality, not the quantity. And we're really trying to create an experience here that goes beyond just a soccer game. And, it's easy to say community. It's another thing to build a sporting event that feels like you're going to a family event, that everybody around you is completely aligned in terms of their mindset and what they want for the team. And so, that really feels great. So thank you for sharing that. And
of course,
it means that we're doing what we really set out to do. And, it kind of blends into the why. And, the why for me has never been I wanted to own a sports team. Frankly, I grew up playing sports. My grandfather had a sports bar inside the Boston Garden before they had sports bars. I would bust tables there in the 70s when I was a teenager, and then go watch Larry Bird square off against Julius Erving on the parquet floor. And so, I definitely grew up with it. I grew up as a suffering Red Sox fan and a suffering Patriots fan. I know there's a lot of people that are younger that didn't know that those two words existed with those teams. But
yeah, you've experienced a lot of redemption from the suffering.
Oh, yeah. I know no one feels sorry for me, but I did pay the dues. So, but my interest was in more into sport. And for those that really, to really tell the story, I gotta kind of go back a little bit, and I gotta talk about the fact that I worked in finance for a long time. About 20 years in aggregate between a couple of jobs and then a couple of years of business school. And I left finance for the simple reason that, it wasn't that it wasn't going well. It was. I was managing a big group of people. Financially, it was very lucrative. Had accomplished a lot of the goals, but I just felt like I wanted to do something else while I was still in my 40s, while I still had the energy and the drive and motivation to go out and do something. The only problem was that I just didn't have any idea what that was. And I know a lot of people feel that way, especially when you're in the heat of the moment with job, family, other things that just doesn't give that you don't have a lot of time to really feel like what is next. So I did what any responsible person would do with 3 kids in school. And I quit my job and went to a coffee shop for 6 months.
I think that makes sense. That's part of the playbook, right?
Absolutely. I did spend a little bit of money building up my Clash of Clans account, but I had a hell of a castle, and I got really good at video games, and I was waiting for that epiphany to come, and it never did. And I remember the day that I just got a little frustrated with that, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to write down on a piece of paper 5 things that I love besides my family. And the first thing I had to do before I could write those things was strip away motivations other than myself. So it couldn't be because I wanted my dad to be proud of me anymore. It couldn't be because I wanted to look good in my community, or I was afraid of failing, or I had to really just say, what are just 5 things that Pete Trevisani loves? And when I was able to strip that stuff away, they came really easily. I love music. I love health and fitness. I love starting new things. Immersive theater was a huge passion of mine. That was number 4. Then number 5 on that list was positive outcomes for people. And that's really, when I started to think about what that meant to me, I decided that I wanted to try to do something that could create positive outcomes for others. And that is when really the aegis and the first seeds of this team came into my mind, because soccer does have this amazing power to bring people together. Soccer is a language that is spoken in every single country, across every single culture, every religion, every sexual identity, every way you can divide up a human being. Soccer can cut through those things, because when you watch a soccer game, you see the same beautiful sport. So that's kind of where it all started, and what we built this upon.
That's amazing. I was reading some of there are a couple of things that came up in listening to you. One is, how did you get to a point where you decided that you were going to leave what sounds fairly objectively to be a pretty comfortable job and situation? Maybe every job has baggage, but just from an outside perspective, what was sort of the series of moments, or how did you get to a point where you said, it's more important that I walk away from this and focus on something else? Then just grind it out.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. But I think it's just what you said. I was comfortable, and I wasn't, I feel like I spent a lot of my life, making myself uncomfortable, creating challenges that weren't going to be easy, and in those moments, I felt like I got the most out of myself and then provided the most reward for myself and ultimately for others around them. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, that was just the way I worked. When I got out of high school, I was a good high school football player, by no means great. I had some Division III schools that might have been looking for a 180-pound defensive tackle. But I decided I wanted to go bigger than that. And when I got in Boston College, just through the regular process, I walked onto the football team and eventually got a scholarship. And just the fact that I wanted to prove that I could do something if I set my mind to it. And I always kind of held that mentality in the workplace as well. So, I ended up going back to business school because I wanted to prove that I could be, academically, I wanted to challenge myself. At Boston College, it was tough, but I was playing sports. I was spending more time in sports than I was studying. And so when I went to Columbia for my MBA, it was really important for me to just really see what I felt, what I had deep down, and challenge myself there. And then when I went out to work, I said, well, what's the NFL of business? And for me at the time, that was Wall Street. I was a bit misguided in that, but that was just what my 26-year-old self felt. And
I mean, there are arguments to be made that neither is a pretty business, but it is a big business.
Yeah, Wall Street's changed a lot. I mean, Wall Street means a lot. I mean, there is really no Wall Street. Like, what do you exactly mean by that? It's a lot of things. But I was looking for, I thought, where could I compete? Where could I go head to toe? And what I found was that for me, the bigger Wall Street firms, I worked for Lehman Brothers, a lot of good people, a lot of great memories, but there's a system there. And if you kind of chug along, you get promoted. And I didn't feel like that it was as much about meritocracy as it was about sort of just the process. So I got frustrated with that and quit after 3 years, even though I was maybe having success internally. And then I went to work for a small boutique firm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I figured it'd be more quality of life. Thornburg Investments was a very small shop, and I was able to build up the institutional business there and turn it into a global business and part of a great team of people. So I got to the point where I was like, I feel like I've done everything I'm going to do. And if I don't make a change, then I was just worried that 10 more years was going to pass. And then I'd really be, asking myself, well, what am I doing with the rest of my life? I'm spending so much time at work. Everyone spends a lot of, even if you work 40 hours a week, that's still a major part of your life. And so for me, it was just coming down to the fact that I was getting uncomfortable being so comfortable, and I wanted to challenge myself. So when I quit, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I spent a lot of time in immersive theater. I ended up, meeting these artists from Santa Fe that had this art collective called Meow Wolf, and did some advisory work for them early, and actually was an early investor there. And that was really rewarding for me because I was working on something that I really loved, but I also didn't want to take a job there. I enjoyed sort of doing that from arm's length. And so, I just felt that it was time to do something. I was looking for something that would feel like I was doing something that was more than just about myself as well. You just heard in the last 10 minutes a lot, myself, and that was important, but I felt like I'd satisfied my own internal cravings. Now, how could I, use all my experience to help others and or promote a platform that could encourage others to promote those around them? And that's where the team came from.
I always find, when you look back, it's sometimes easier to see and connect all the dots, right? And there are a million quotes about connecting the dots in 2020 hindsight. But looking back, hearing the story about not feeling challenged and maybe feeling a little bit complacent and having the bandwidth and capacity to step away and really immerse yourself in reflection, it sounds like you did. Looking back, can you sort of see the dots that took you to soccer though? Because like you said, and if you do a quick Google search, you've talked about it before. It wasn't like you were, a Man U fan for your whole life and you were obsessed with soccer and you thought you were going to break out in soccer like you were in football, you were in sports, but soccer is not a traditionally American obsession, although it is shifting. So what were some of the moments when you went from this, I want to build something, I want to be immersed in something that has an impact on the community and has an impact on people, and how did you get to soccer and bringing a team to New Mexico, a typically very underserved state when it comes to pro sports of any kind?
Yeah, I mean, those are really good questions. I'll answer it. There's still going to be some fog in there because and all that fog is what other people call leap of faith, more heart than head. And there was some of that. But you're right. Soccer to me as a kid was growing up in the Boston area in the 80s. Soccer was the sport that the hockey players played because they didn't want to get hurt playing football. And, in my mind, it was just a boring 1-0 game. I had no appreciation for it. And so I didn't really even begin to think about soccer until late 1998. And I've talked about this before when I lived in London and I got to see a World Cup match up close and started to understand the beauty of the game, why 1-0 could be the most exporting, or a 0-0 game could be the most exciting thing you've ever seen. if it's played right with the right amount of tension. But most important, I got to see how in London in 1998, how it brought everyone together, all the different cultures together, all the different countries together. Everyone would gather in these pubs together and support each other and sing. And it was so inclusive, and I loved that. And I hadn't quite seen that in a way that I just didn't see in American sports. And so then it became, you're right. So as I was doing things in immersive theater, this idea came of, what if we brought a professional soccer team to New Mexico? And so I met with the United Soccer League. They actually reached out to me as a potential investor, and I sat in a room of people who they were pitching to, and they're asking somebody else to be the lead investor at the time. And I kind of heard it, and the guy they were pitching to, he has other businesses. He has other things he's focused on. He was interested in maybe doing it so we could get a stadium, more real estate focused. And I left there thinking, yeah, I'm not going to invest in that because it needs someone's full-time attention. But something kind of stuck with me from that meeting. And over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I just started playing it over and over again. And I was like, man, if we could bring a sports team here, if we, what I pictured, if we could have something that, a father could go to with his daughter. Maybe they don't have so much to talk about every day. Maybe their lives are really busy. But for a couple hours, they find some commonality. Maybe that translates back into the home, and maybe that creates a positive outcome for them. And maybe that positive outcome, flows into the workforce, flows back into the schools. Maybe then if people are sitting next to each other, and that, this happened, I think it was the second game. It's a story that I fall back on because it really sticks in my mind right now. I was looking down, and there was a woman with blue hair, middle-aged woman with blue hair, sitting next to a guy who was in his sort of business suit, business outfit. And it was pretty clear they hadn't come to the game together. But in the second half, it was a tight game, and there was a foul, and I saw them both jump up in front of me and start yelling at the ref. Rightly so, actually. But, and then when they stopped yelling, they started talking to each other and explaining their view, and they agreed that this ref had wronged their home team. And then they sat down, and I watched them. For the next 15 minutes, they talked, and they were pointing at the field, and they were communicating. And I'm like, if those two people who on the surface of it couldn't be more opposite, who on the surface of it probably had very strong judgments about that other person, what they represented and stood for, who they voted for, and how they think about the world. If they could find some common ground, then maybe on the field, then maybe they can find some common ground off the field and have more empathy for each other's positions. And in that case, we could become a less divided state, a less divided, group, less divided human beings, ultimately. And that really brought me a lot of happiness, because that's why we pushed this forward. And that is happening. You saw it when you were here, whether you saw examples of that or not. It's a very diverse group of people. There's no typical New Mexican, and people are coming together and putting differences aside to find some common ground. So,
hey, look, the fans behind us were Aggies, and my brother-in-law's a Lobo. And there was some cordial chatting going on. So I think that's pretty much the ultimate result.
Yeah, if you can get Lobos and Aggies to decide that they can agree on something, then you definitely got something phenomenal here.
For those without New Mexico knowledge, you can Google that. A lot of success, and I know it's an expansion club. What are some, and I'm sure there's more than we can even break into, what are some challenges that came up that really threw you for a loop? And you can pick one if it's easier. And what was it like navigating that?
Okay. So yeah, we could just go on about all those. I mean, it's funny, people see the success of the team, but it's been a challenge. One thing about doing a sports team, for people that may just think it must be fun running a team and playing games. Like, a sports team is really about 8 businesses to 12 businesses in one. It's actually, for me, it's super fun. I feel like it's exactly what I should be doing. But not only are we, managing a roster and salaries and putting on a team that has to like compete on the field. We also have, we have to sell tickets. So we're like in the, that whole end of the entertainment business. We have a merchandise business, and this would be I'll just even stick there. Like, we have a complete merchandise business here that in itself, would be something to be proud of. At our at our game on Saturday night, we worked with an outsourced firm, and the result was that we were told on a per cap basis that what we sold in stadium that night would rival an NBA Finals game. And we blew away per caps in the NFL, all sports teams, NBA Finals game. And that's really great. But the pain that I went through personally, because merchandise for a sports team, you think, oh, it's hats and T-shirts. How hard is that? It's a lot harder than you think. And
so the swag is strong for New Mexico United. I mean, like,
thank you.
I don't have a lot of sports like a team gear, but the Somos Unidos shirt with like the 3 stripes on the hip, and the scoop shirt.
Nice.
That was good.
I love it. And we just got all new gear. One of the things that I talk about here is like, look, let's make 500 of them. When they're gone, they're gone. We're going to move on. Like, your swag actually starts to become, a timeline, and you see, okay, I had the first scarf ever. I had the first jersey ever. I had one of the 500 T-shirts. Now you can't get them. And things become vintage pretty quick here. But managing through the merch, I mean, I think that I made major mistakes that I'm embarrassed about for someone that, feels like they have a lot of business experience. Basic stuff, but it was really difficult, and mostly it was difficult because it wasn't my priority, and it's not a merchandise store. I was trying to get a brand activated, trying to get a stadium full, trying to negotiate broadcast deals, trying to negotiate with vendors for build out a back end office, all these other things, and have a merch brand that just took off. I couldn't keep anything in stock. I was having trouble keeping track of inventory. We had the wrong point of sale system. We didn't barcode off the bat. We used an iPad thinking it wouldn't be that busy. Like, basic mistake after mistake after mistake. And finally, I can feel like we turned a major corner on that, and it's showing up. But that's just like one example of a failure. Another one was, and this is actually a really good lesson, was our branding. Before we came out, I was going through just the simple shield that you see now. And I was working with 2 people. It was like a 2-man band, but they were really giving us a lot of attention. And we went through hundreds and hundreds of logos and shields. I mean, my wife was like, stop sending me, just pick one. Everyone was like, just pick one. But it didn't feel right. And I was about to just pick one. And it was a Friday. And on Tuesday, we were going to tell people what we were going with. And it didn't feel right. And that weekend, we sent the final one to a different branding firm and said, hey, could you guys, for some season tickets, could you guys maybe see what you think of this and provide some other options? And so they came back a few days later, and they had something that wasn't like, it wasn't hugely different, but it is what we have today. That pivot, that actually willingness to basically, I walked away from our original branders. All the money we put into those guys, all the work, basically, none of it ended up going out public. But I basically had to swallow some pride and use it as a sunk cost and then go forward. And so, that was a decision. If we'd come out with the other shield, even though New Mexico United would probably still be doing well, it was not as good. It wasn't as clean and tight and strong as what we have now. So, the lesson there was, don't be afraid to pivot. Don't let what you've done up to that point keep you from changing. You have to, if it doesn't feel right, if you don't think it's right, it probably isn't right for you. And that's all that really matters. And so, there's another great lesson.
I think that's so interesting. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right for you. Mm-hmm. That's something that I try and think about a lot, and I encourage people to think about. there's a reason why you're at a decision point, and you've done a lot of work to get there. So even with the Shield example, right?
Yeah.
Like you're already well on your way to having a full-blown soccer club in a state that doesn't have a pro team. And there are reasons why you got there, and they're typically intangible. I mean, you can point to some really hard facts, but the decision making and like the yes, no on different details, you ended up somewhere for a reason.
Right.
And sometimes we second guess ourselves, and this goes back to getting back in your head, right? We start to overthink things, and we go down a decision tree that takes us in the wrong direction because we forget that there was this instinct or this gut or this collective perspective that we've gained, and we lose touch with it. So I think that's a really great story, and it really crystallizes that, putting all this work and all this energy into a brand and a look, and saying there's something that is just a little off.
Right, and that little off was yeah, I had to be honest about it. I mean, look, and I think it's true for business. It's true for relationships. You know, it's true for other things outside of business. And you know, you only know you. And when you're able to really tap into how you feel, and you're really honest about it, you know when something's a little off and you know when it isn't. And don't let other people convince you that just because it might look great to them, or not look great to them, doesn't mean that it's not right for you. So, you know, that was, by the way, when we went with the new brand, there was a lot of arguments inside of our own company. People wanted, you know, it wasn't just the one we went with. Everyone had their own opinion. Naming the team was a great example where people internally here hated the name United. But I loved it because I felt like that's exactly what we wanted to do. And just because there's other teams like Manchester United or DC United, whatever that means to them isn't what it means to us. And if it is, it's a coincidence. And so making things your own, you know, is also important, and understanding what it means to you. So I've learned that a lot. I'm never going to, you know, I'll probably doubt myself for sure, but I'm always going to listen to myself, ultimately. And so far that's served me really well.
No, that's, again, and I think we've been doing this a lot, you know, just agreeing with each other, but I think there's a lot of value in that earned perspective. This is not flippant. It's not something that you just came up with. It's something that you've learned over time.
That's right.
And you have your own personal data points to look back at that and say, look, this is a proven method. What's a piece of advice that you received specifically around breaking into sports in this way that was impactful to you?
Yeah. You know, it wasn't, I'm going to maybe not answer that the obvious way with just sort of what someone said to me one day. I'm going to answer it a little bit differently. And I haven't really answered it like this before. So bear with me on it. But, you know, when I was learning a lot about the team, you know, doing the teams, I'd go down to some of the ownership meetings. I'd meet with seasoned executives, and everyone was focused on numbers, which they should be. When I looked at sales plans, it was all about, hey, when you do the national anthem, bring out the high school choir, because then they'll invite all their teachers and students and parents, and you'll sell 100 tickets. And I kept seeing all these things, and something felt really off. And what was off about it is it just didn't feel authentic enough to me. And why I'm using that word was the authenticity. That the piece of advice that really made a big impact for me was when I was doing my work with Meow Wolf. And which, you know, for people that don't know Meow Wolf, and that's probably a lot of people, even though it's become, you know, it's become a well-known art collective, making some amazing immersive experiences. You know, Meow Wolf was a bunch of high school friends that didn't go to college. They wanted to create art, and all the art galleries didn't want to buy their art because rich people weren't going to buy what Meow Wolf was making. But they saw that that kids their age, you know, millennials, kids of their generation, young adults of their generation, loved interacting and touching and feeling the art. They just didn't want to look at it. And so Meow Wolf, over 10 years, all these 17, 18-year-olds spent their 20s, waiting tables, valeting cars, dog walking. And then eventually we're able to convince someone, and I was one of those someones to help them build their first exhibit, the House of Eternal, not their first, but their major exhibit, the House of Eternal Return, which has been a phenomenon with 600,000 visitors a year. It's a long way of saying, like, I felt really inspired by their authenticity there. And so I looked at what other teams are doing, and I said, we don't have to do it that way. We are the only, and the reason we did that is because we weren't just looking to maximize the profits on the front of our jersey. And that's what we came up with. So anyways, I just think being authentic, listening to, what matters for you, that's really, that's really the best advice I can give.
I think that's great. And I think also where it came from, obviously a little crossover with some of the work that you've been doing, but I think there is something to be said, bringing art into the sports arena, whether it's through partnership or through inspiration. And I think Steve Jobs used to talk about, being at the intersection of liberal arts and technology and science. And there's a lot of power in bringing different worlds together, which is a lot of what I've heard in the story about this team and about what's inspired you to go off into an area that probably a lot of people told you not to do. I'm sure you got discouraged individually and collectively by a decent amount of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I got a lot of people did discourage, say, oh, if you want to lose money, go into sports, and then, but I also realized in the USL and pro sports in general, it's not very common for the owner to be also like the CEO and the president, and really is hands-on. I know there's other teams, maybe Jerry Jones is super hands-on. Maybe Robert Kraft, could be hands-on. Can't really speak for them. But
unfortunately, Daniel Snyder. Almost
all the other owners in our league, they had another business, and for me, this is all I'm doing. I'm laser focused on it. I work here every day. I'm in our office. I live in Santa Fe, which is about an hour and 15 minutes from Albuquerque, where the team is based. And so I bought an apartment down here. I spend 3 or 4 nights a week here because it's not that I can't deal with the commute. It's just that I need to be around people here to be in touch with the energy that of this team and of this community. And so, I think that's been a big plus, so that when there's an issue, it's not somebody going to the owner to try to explain something. The owner says, oh, don't do that. That's not good for the bottom line. I'm on the front lines with everyone, making decisions with everyone. And when people, and it's a good lesson. When I hear people want to start a new business and they want to do it while they're running another business, that can be tough. I understand the realities that drive that decision, but if you're praying to more than one God at once, then you're getting spread out thin, and it makes it harder for you to achieve your mission. So, when I heard people saying what all the challenges were, I felt that if I was engaged in it and attacking it, that and leading a team and had a great team around me. I haven't said team as much as I should, because I really get 25 people here working their butt off every day to make this happen, that believe deeply in it. You can get it done.
That's good. That's a great place to end. And I also want to be conscious of our time. It's evaporated. But one, because I love soccer, two, because I'm a fan of people that really see something that they can't stop thinking about and just go at it. Mm-hmm. And that's the vibe that I get. And from me observing you in the store to hitting you up on Instagram and you responding and, emailing with your team, like you mentioned, you have a group of people that support your vision and the work you're doing, and getting to this conversation, it's very clear that you're doing something different and it's working in ways that maybe not everyone can understand or explain, which I appreciate. What's really parting piece of information? What's the best place for people to check in? Should they go to the team website? Do you talk about the work you're doing? Where should people check in online?
Yeah, I mean, I think, depending on what your, interest is, if you're looking for, if you're in the area, you live in New Mexico, or you're visiting and you want to come see a game, and if you're visiting New Mexico and you want to see what New Mexico is all about, come to a game, because you're going to feel the energy of the people there, whether you love soccer or not, whether you've been to a pro soccer game or not. It's worth the 2 hours and to come, sit in a beautiful park on a beautiful summer night. So come to NewMexicoUTD.com and you can get some tickets. If you just want to see some beautiful imagery, one of the things that the league did is they recommend you have 8 salespeople and 2 marketing people. We have 2 salespeople and 8 marketing people, because we have photographers, videographers, because I believe that if people can gain access to see what we're seeing and what we're feeling, then it's going to attract the right people. So go on to Instagram and follow us, or Facebook or Twitter. Go look at some of the imagery. Don't take our word for it. Go look at the faces. We just had Meow Wolf Night, where we blended art and sport. We had giant puppets and stilt walkers and all kinds of artists, break dancers and painters. Go check out some of those images on Instagram. Check out some of the videos. It's really fun. And I'd encourage you to come check us out at New Mexico UTD is our handle across all social.
Nice. And I can attest that it's a pretty awesome social experience. And also, you all are very generous with reposting and sharing engaged and amped fans.
Oh, yeah.
Peter, thank you for being on the Founder's Mind. Oh. I always learn so much from these conversations, and yours was no exception. I learned a ton, and I hope that my listeners do as well. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Founder's Mind. Check back soon for Season 2, sponsored by Upside Business Travel. Learn more about Upside at upside.com. If you like what you're hearing, we'd love your support. Sign up to be a funder of The Founder's Mind. To support the show, you can go to the show notes or head to thefoundersmind.com and click the link Funder. To make sure you don't miss any awesome wisdom from guests and stay up to date on the most recent episodes of the show, be sure to visit thefoundersmind.com. You can also follow along on social at The Founder's Mind. Last but not least, thank you to Roy Matz for the music on this show and his dope editing skills that make The Founder's Mind possible. Until next time, take care.
Going through all of this insanity and try to bring new ideas, make them a reality. Illuminate in the thoughts, make it a priority to implement what you learn. What you get is what you be. In a world full of noise, hard to find that clarity to try to lead subtly, never full of vanity, and try to change something small or try to change humanity. Power forward through the dark. Founder's Mind is what you see. Founder's Mind is what you see.